Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hello, I'm Phillip Wylie, and welcome to the Hacker Factory. I refer to myself as the hacker maker because I love and I'm passionate about teaching ethical hacking and pen testing, as well as helping people start their careers as penetration testers. In each episode, I have some really cool people from the community that are experts in the industry, anywhere from hobbyists to pros. And today I'm really excited to have Alissa Knight on here. Alissa Knight is like one of my favorite hackers, and she does some really cool stuff. And I can't wait for you to hear about the things she is doing. So thanks for joining us, Alissa. Could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, Phillip Wylie. Thanks for having me. I've been wanting to, like I said, I've been wanting to be on your show for quite a while now. So I want to give my appreciation to you for inviting me. So thanks for having me on. But so for your audience who doesn't know who I am, shame on you. How can you not know who I am? No, I'm just kidding. So I'm a recovering hacker, recovering entrepreneur, recovering perfectionist, recovering everything. I started hacking. Actually, I'm gonna start my bio out differently for a lot of my followers who are always hearing it. I actually started in the BBS scene. I ran a multi-node BBS in Seattle, if you remember those days, in 2400 baud dial-up modems. I ran a modded Renegade and a modded Oblivion board. And back in the days of upload-download ratios, if you're old enough, Phillip, to remember that. So I started hacking, initially got into phone phreaking and, Alt 2600 and all that fun stuff. And that led me into IRC and meeting other hackers. And at the time, hacking was very different. You really had to know how to GCC -O compile stuff, not like it is today where you get this Metasploit module for the latest 0-day or a point and click GUI. It was, you were at the command shell and you had to make stuff work. And so, it wasn't just about finding the latest woo FTP, woo exploit, but actually getting it to work. And having said that, that's kind of where I started out. I was around 17 when I hacked into a government network and got caught. They were waiting for me at school and they arrested me on campus as soon as I walked on campus. I knew something was different about that day. It's like everyone was it was weird. It was like right out of a scene in a movie. I could just feel everyone staring at me, and I got rushed right when I got on campus. So that ended up turning into drop charges because the investigation wasn't handled properly. So the district attorney dropped the charges, and I went to actually go work for the U.S. intelligence community in cyber warfare. Shortly thereafter, I did actually start and sell multiple cybersecurity startups. So I did about $8 million in M&A transactions in starting and selling companies. I'm in the middle of my third exit. So it's looking like it's going to be about a $10 million M&A exit. I've also started a venture capital fund, and now I'm a content creator. So basically, I'm creating what I like to call adversarial content. And what that is, Phillip, is like if you were to take a hacker and a content creator and they were to have a baby, I would basically be the product of that. So what I do is I work with cybersecurity vendors and I try and get them to throw out all of these preconceived notions of what content marketing should be. And I help them figure out what their blue ocean strategy is. So, for example, I don't know if you've read that book, Blue Ocean Strategy, but it was written by two MBAs out of Harvard. And what they do is they talk about the story of Cirque du Soleil and how they didn't want to compete against the circus. They wanted to redefine what the circus was. And so what I do is I work with cybersecurity vendors to really eliminate their competition by making them irrelevant and charting their own blue ocean that they could use to basically artificially and synthetically create market demand. That it doesn't have to be stolen from your competitors, that it can be artificially created. And so I do that through content. And so let's say, for example, like Sentinel-1 came to me and said, hey, we're releasing this new IoT security product. We want you to create a paper on it. And I said, okay, well, what if I were to park my car in the parking lot of a bank and hack the bank through the CCTV cameras in the parking lot? And then I did that and wrote a paper on it. It was this amazing thing. So this basically thus was born adversarial content. And so I proved the efficacy of security products by hacking something and showing how their product would have prevented it. So today, fast forward to present day, in addition to content marketing, I also am a day trader. I'm also a published author. I published the first book on hacking connected cars. So I really got branded in the industry as an embedded systems hacker, hacking passenger transport vehicles. I'm hacking connected trains. I'm also hacking a super yacht. And I'm also in the process of publishing a new book on hacking APIs. So wow. Sorry if that was a little long-winded.
No,
you were probably thinking like, "Oh my God, when is she going to shut up?"
No, that's great. I could listen to what you do for hours. That's pretty awesome. Thanks. Especially the business stuff too. Because a lot of your hackers and your nerds out there don't have the business acumen.
It's rare.
That's really cool to be able to take your creativity, beyond just hacking. It's a creative area of cybersecurity, but to be able to take that to business and be able to do so well, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'm glad you touched on that because so many penetration testers think that they may be really good at buffer overflows and even writing their own exploits and smashing the stack for fun and profit or whatever. But if you don't know how to communicate those vulnerabilities to what it translates to the business, you're not going to be as effective. And so I feel like I've always really had this ability to translate extremely labyrinthine things in cybersecurity and translate them into a business context. Because you and I both know the business isn't going to fix every vulnerability you find as a pen tester. They're just not. They're going to find the things that are an unacceptable risk to the business and fix those. So you're right. That's definitely, there's a creative side of me that always really enjoyed creating the penetration test report. I haven't been able to meet a single pen tester that likes writing the report. I love writing the report. It's my favorite part. Putting the screenshots in, describing the tactics and techniques that I used and the exploitation and just trying to explain that in a business context to me is really what it makes you a more effective penetration tester.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the big mistakes people getting into it is the soft skills, be able to communicate and write well. And that's the part people don't really like. But for, people that are new to this, you got to realize this is what the customer's paying for at the end of the day. Otherwise, the only thing they got is some network traffic that you did anything. So they need, really good details. And when you can, just as you mentioned, showing the risk and the business end, that's a good way to get the businesses to consider fixing things. Because otherwise, a lot of times, business folks don't see the value in that.
Exactly. It's just a cost center to them, right? So you need to be able to translate that to the potentiality for that threat to be realized, that vulnerability to be exploited. It's funny. I don't talk about this much, but I actually used to do some work for a subsidiary of Walt Disney. So there's definitely this creative side of me that I love. I love entertaining, no pun intended. But that I love entertaining and really just being a part of it. I've really fallen in love with videography. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I used to be a fashion photographer. So when I sold my last company, I started a fashion photography company. I did couture photo shoots, and I just definitely have this very creative side of me that comes out. And I think maybe that's what I love penetration testing. What I love about penetration testing the most is how creative you can be. Like, for example, if you think about hacking APIs, there's a lot of creativity there where you need to think outside the box and color outside the lines. And I guess really in any pen test. And that's what I love about the work that we do is you do have to be very creative. You have to think about the things that the developer didn't expect to receive as a stimulus. And that to me is all hacking is. You're just learning how something works and you're trying to figure out what the developer didn't expect to receive and then send that and see what happens. So I think that's probably, it scratches that itch and that side of my brain. That's the more creative side, the right side of my brain where I want to create things and figure out how things work and then take it apart.
So based on all the different things you do, you just must really have an appetite for, you must get bored easy. And so I couldn't see you working in some company where you're doing the same play. If you were forced to, and I couldn't see you doing this, forced into doing the same kind of pen test over and over again, I'm sure that would drive you crazy.
The most I always tell people, I make the worst employee, which is why I think, I ended up, being blessed with that entrepreneurial blood, because I make a horrible employee. I always feel sorry for my managers who've always ever had to manage me, because I'm very, what's the word I want to use here? I'll say that you are correct. I hate to be bored. And I think the longest I lasted was 2 years, doing the same thing over and over, day in, day out. And now today I get to wake up every morning and reinvent myself and do something different. For example, I don't know if you saw that video of me hacking those law enforcement vehicles on my YouTube channel. But I went from that to now law enforcement has asked me to begin hacking their drone program. And, those are these kind of drones that can carry payloads and do drug interdiction, and being able to hack drones. Much to your point, Phillip, I need to be constantly learning. I need to be constantly be doing something different. And that sure as hell needs to be something creative. And I think that's what I love about content, being a content creator. And let me qualify that a little better. The kind of content creator that I define as being a content creator, which is very hands-on, blowing something up, hacking something, and then turning that into content like a video or a white paper, and explaining what I did and how it works and what that means. So I love the fact that I've been able to figure out a way to marry those two worlds together.
That's awesome. And I like your idea of these adversary videos you're doing. And for some of our listeners that are new to hacking, when you're doing adversary simulation or anything like that, this is really more emulating a real threat actor, a real malicious hacker, nation state, or that sort of thing. So it's a lot different than running, Nessus vulnerability scanner, yeah, and then, running Metasploit and all that. And you're done with the report and stuff, report on a bunch of things like some really low level SSL or TLS type findings. This gets a lot more creative and more realistic to what a real attacker would do. Agreed.
And that's exactly it. And so for me, I don't remember the last time I used a vulnerability scanner for anything. I mean, if you think about what we're doing, especially in hacking APIs, in 2019, I hacked 30 banks through their APIs. In 2020, I hacked 30 mHealth APIs and their mobile apps. Now I'm hacking cars through APIs and taking remote control of the car, like starting and stopping the engine and locking and unlocking the doors through the APIs. Now I'm hacking, connected passenger vehicles like trains and super yachts. Everything is communicating with APIs today. It's the underbelly of our entire infrastructure now. Financial services, healthcare. We've got the FHIR deadlines coming up for FHIR APIs for healthcare providers and payers to make electronic health records available to anyone through these APIs. And they're vulnerable. And I'm demonstrating the vulnerability of those through my vulnerability research. And the world seems to want more of it, which is what I'm going to continue to do. But much to your point, it's not a traditional pen test where I'm following the penetration testing execution standard. And I'm starting out with intel and reconnaissance. And, it's very much like you can't just throw a Nessus scanner at an API. It's a lot of it is intercepting, doing interdiction on the network traffic between the mobile app and the API and analyzing it and seeing and actually documenting what each button in the mobile app does and what the stimulus to the API endpoint is. And then documenting that and then fuzzing it and then taking that and copying, pasting it into Postman or another API client and manipulating that API request to ask for something else and see how the API responds. So a lot of it is you can't just throw a scanner at it because it just doesn't work. The closest thing I use is a fuzzer like Kiteworks, but Kite Runner, but I mean, or Wrestler, but fuzzing, other than fuzzing, a lot of it is just very manual. It's you just can't use scanners for something like that. Now, there are some really cool products coming out that will allow you to do that. But again, that's more in the fuzzing space and using machine learning to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure in some of your cases, even if there could exist something like that, O-Days, there's no, signature for some of these O-Days. That's something you have to find yourself. It's research like Alissa does that ends up becoming a signature eventually in these type of softwares.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's a great point, and a lot of the stuff is, okay, if I try this stimulus with this API and I use my JOT token instead of the authorized users token, will it let me do that? Or if I'm authenticated and I'm a legitimate API request because I have a legitimate token and I send this request, but I'm requesting another record like Phillip's medical records instead of mine through what's called a broken object level authorization vulnerability or BOLA vulnerability, then, I shouldn't be able to request your records, but I can in some cases, and that's what that most recent research demonstrated. I'm going to be starting an event calendar here of 25 different conferences that I'm going to be speaking at. And a lot of that is unveiling a lot of these hacks that are done of these healthcare APIs, where I was able to successfully download EHR records for tens of thousands of patients, even though I just had my own login. So there's a lot of authorization, authentication issues out there with APIs, and a lot of the embedded systems I'm looking at. You got connected medical devices as well that you just simply can't find with a Nessuscan or a Metasploit, auxiliary scanner. A lot of it is manual.
Yeah, that's very cool. And for people that hadn't tested APIs, it's a different animal, and a lot of people just really haven't figured it out well. I mean, you see most people still kind of have a challenge with that. So that's really, really pretty cool. And so some advice to those listening is to learn how to pen test APIs. So what are some good resources on learning how to pen test APIs?
Definitely wait for my new book coming out. I'm actually, I can't talk much about it. There's some really exciting announcement we're going to be making here soon with that book. But definitely that book. Unfortunately, Phillip, as you mentioned, there really isn't much content out there for hacking APIs. The thing is, you can't really throw a rock and hit a pen tester that that can hack an API. Just because you can pen test an IIS Windows server or an Apache Linux server doesn't mean you know how to hack an API. Most pen testers I talk to, as soon as they see JSON responses or JOT tokens, they freak out. I agree with you, Phillip. For those of you listening and want to become penetration testers, or you want to niche yourself into something that's a little bit more of a labyrinthine area of pen testing, definitely take a look at APIs. There are some great courses out there that are online. I think Udemy has one on hacking APIs as well that I've seen. If you Google it, there are some texts. There's obviously some articles that I've written on hacking APIs I would take a look at, like, especially on the mobile app side, like installing mobile security framework and doing static and dynamic code analysis. You can find those articles on my Medium articles, as well as on my LinkedIn Pulse article. But there's some great articles out there as well. But if you go on Amazon and you do a search for something like a book on hacking APIs, there's none out there right now. And so that was another reason that really was the impetus behind me writing this book. I like to write content. I know you've been following me for a while now, Phillip. As you know, I like to write content that is rare. I like to write content that other people are not covering. I don't want to be just another voice in the crowd. I want to create novel content that people don't really fully understand or need a resource for. Like, for example, before this, I was writing articles and doing videos on building rogue base stations to hack connected cars, through GSM. It's an area that's very difficult to understand, how to actually turn your laptop into a rogue cell tower. That's not something that everyone knows how to do. So, put some videos out there on it, put some papers out there on it. That's what I like doing is filling this void, this content void.
That's really cool. And one of the things I kind of compare that to people like yourself that's coming out with these new things, kind of cutting edge technology in the hacking field, is I like to compare it to like sports, like Olympic athletes, people that are strength athletes. A lot of people don't realize these things can be done, and we're limited to what can be done until someone proves, hey, you can do this. And then that pushes the envelope and inspires other people to contribute.
Well, it's interesting with this healthcare research because it's actually getting political attention and it's beginning to actually affect public policy. So there was this news report that recently surfaced about several congressmen, 2 congressmen, I believe, out of New Jersey, that were referencing, and this news article also referenced the healthcare research of me publishing these vulnerabilities and hacking APIs. And politically, there's congressmen who are trying to use my vulnerability research to either support their position on killing bills or changing public policy when it comes to this and sharing of EHR, electronic health records. And so it's really neat, the kind of stuff that I'm doing right now. It's definitely getting attention on Capitol Hill. And I, am currently talking with several folks and who are in elected positions. So it's a lot of fun. I love what I do, and I feel very blessed and fortunate that I can do that. We live in a very different time. If you remember 20 years ago, if you published an exploit in something, you were threatened with legal trouble. The legal counsel for the company, you were threatened with potentially being arrested for identifying and publishing vulnerabilities. So it was scary to be a vulnerability researcher 20 years ago. Now with BugCrowd and HackerOne, these platforms for bounty hunter programs, and I know you've had some guests on your show that are big bounty hunters, super bounty hunters. It's really changed the climate for vulnerability research, and it's paved the way for the people like me who are using this to create new content and teach.
Speaking to like the bug crowd or the bug bounty programs and stuff, one of the things I just have to keep saying every time I hear this, I love the opportunities that it opens up for people globally. Some people in some countries that don't have the opportunities to make good money, that helps. And it really helps the diversity of security researchers. You get like a broader view of things, not just one perspective of just us in the United States. You've got people globally. So that's also another good thing. But I'm sure there's a lot of bug hunters that are probably glad that you're not a bug bounty hunter, because you'd probably with the API stuff, you'd probably be getting all the bounties.
It's funny. I'm about to announce another thing that I can't talk too much about, but there's this other announcement that's going to be coming here soon, and it relates to bounty programs. But and it's funny that question came, was like, Alissa, why aren't you selling these vulnerabilities to bounties? For bounties, I'm like, I just never. And it's funny that you know this about me, that I'm not a bounty hunter. Because and I have nothing against bounty hunters. I have nothing against bounty programs. I just never got into it. It was just never something that appealed to me to just, wake up every morning and just find vulnerabilities in things and then, sell them and work through these bounty programs to get money for it. That doesn't sound fun to me. To me, it's like, I want to find vulnerabilities in things in order to make the world safer. It's not about the money for me. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that. I agree with you. There's a lot of people who've lived below the poverty line in Latin America and other places that don't have access to this kind of cash flow. And now they do because of the bounty program. So that's amazing. I love that. #MorePlace. But what I'm talking about is, like, for me, that is not appealing to me. And so what I want to do is I want to actually create this visually entertaining and cinematic and, just these amazing trailers and videos around this vulnerability research, while also teaching people and educating people on how to do this and what happens if you don't do this properly. If you don't properly write secure code, or if you don't properly shield write when you launch it. So to me, using a combination of that creative life of creating something like a visual content through a video, while combining it with hacking, that is fun to me. That is what floats my boat.
Yeah, I can imagine. And by the time, bug bounties and all that stuff came out, you were so advanced in your career, I'm sure that wouldn't be as interesting, but that's really, really cool. The different things I'm sure, that would be pretty awesome to be able to go out and find things like that no one's thought of and existed. So for someone to gain, what kind of recommendations you make for someone that wants to be a hacker, a penetration tester? Where would you start? How would you start out and learn to be a good one? And I know and this is going past, everyone sees the courses out there, the books and all this stuff, but a lot of times they skip over. It's the vulnerability scan, Metasploit, some manual stuff.
They want to jump right into
overflows, people rush in and don't take the time. But really, what would you recommend for someone that really wants to be good?
So I'm going to say this partially in jest and partially serious. RTFM. One of the things is that I don't know if this is generational. I'm not going to get into the politics of millennials versus, XYZ or whatever. But the one thing that I have noticed, and I have a 17-year-old son, and he hates to read. He doesn't read. No, it seems like today nobody wants to read anymore. Everyone wants everything in the size of a bite-sized tweet, or they wanted to, it can't be more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the video because you lose their attention. Oh my God. How have we gotten to that place where 2.5 minutes is too long for a video? So, I think my recommendation to everyone, because I have been inundated with so many LinkedIn messages and DMs on Twitter about teach me how to hack, it just becomes nauseating. And I have the utmost respect and love for my fans and everyone out there who follow me, and I love you for it, and I would not be where I am without you. But for those of you who want to learn how to hack, the best advice I have for you is to go out there and read and learn on your own. Because even if I spend all day with you and teach you from cradle to grave how to hack an API or how to hack an embedded system, you will not learn nearly as much if you go out there and learn it on your own. When I was first introduced to security on this side of the defense side, I was actually, and actually I've never talked about this on a podcast before. So you heard it here first on Phillip Wylie's podcast on The Factory. I was running a web hosting company. I was doing web design, and the name of the company was Winter Rain Graphics. And I was designing websites, and I was like selling these things for $20K. I couldn't believe that my clients were paying what they were paying. But, I was designing websites, and I would host the site. And I remember the Teardrop Linux exploit came out. And if you remember that, it was like a kernel buffer overflow. Anyway, and the exploit got published, and servers were randomly getting teardropped. And so I didn't know what to do about it. And so what I did was I ran to Barnes & Noble, if anyone remembers or even has one near them what Barnes & Noble is. It's a bookstore, kids. And I bought a book on security, and learned what I could about securing a Linux box from that book, and combined with everything else that predated that. But I guess that's my answer to your question, Phillip, is go out there and read, study for the CISSP, grab the common body of knowledge, and learn about the CIA triad and the different security controls. If you figure out whether or not you want to be a red teamer or a blue teamer, and then on the blue team side, do you want to do forensics and incident response and be a crime scene investigator, or do you want to do log analysis, intrusion analysis, and detect attacks? Do you want to be a threat hunter? If you wanted to do red team and you want to find the holes and find the vulnerabilities, what kind of pen tester do you want to be? Do you want to focus on embedded systems? Do you want to focus on web application security? I can tell you that a lot has changed in the hacking scene, from 20 years ago. Before, you would find a buffer overflow in Woo FTPD or Apache. And now it's that hard candy exterior soft GUI interior with networks. And now it even extends out to the cloud. So, do you want to be a penetration tester of AWS workloads? Do you want to get into hacking APIs or embedded systems? So there's so many areas that you can niche yourself, or do you want to be a jack of all trades and just do general security administration?
Very interesting. That's one of the things I've kind of mentioned to people along the way. It just seems like really, if you really want to get good at something, because I've pretty much most of my career done web app, Wi-Fi, and network pen testing, and then finally got into some cloud. But it just seems like when you're focusing on so many different areas, it's really hard to get really good at one area when you're trying to learn all of it.
Yeah, it's trying to be a master, jack of all trades, master of all, and it's really tough to do that. What my advice to all of you is niche yourself in one individual area of security and get really good at it. And then once you feel like, you've quote unquote mastered it, which I don't think is ever possible. I think you could spend your whole career doing something and still not master it. But, and then move on from there. But, don't try and boil the ocean and be great at everything. Be great at forensics, be great at intrusion analysis, be great at pen test. That's really tough to do, especially when starting out. Along my career path, I've started out in these individual niches and areas and did it for a few years and then moved on and did it for a few years. And, you figure out what really just kind of tickles your pickle and makes you happy doing on a daily basis. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Are you happy in your job? Are you happy with what you're doing? Because if you're happy, it'll come through in your work. It'll be obvious in your work if you are unhappy. And that's one thing that I've always found with people is you can get a work product from them and you can tell right away by reading it that they weren't excited about doing it, that they didn't put everything into it. If you're not happy doing it, it's going to show in your work.
Yeah, that's good advice. And just based on my personal experience, if you're passionate about something, you're going to put in more hours learning it. If you're trying to learn something you're not interested in, it's going to be really hard to learn it. And you work with those kind of people in the field, no matter what you're doing, that you see those people that once 5 o'clock comes, they don't think about it again. But, people that get good at this, they're, you're studying on your own time and learning.
And God bless our spouses out there who support us in our jobs, our wives, our husbands, partners, because the one thing they can say, and I tell this to everyone, if you're going to get into cybersecurity, you need to prepare yourself for the fact that it's not a job. It's not even a career. It's a lifestyle. Cybersecurity is a life. And, and it's going to affect your loved ones around you because, it's not, like you said, it's not a 9 to 5. I remember when SQL Slammerworm hit, man, we were put up in hotel rooms for an entire week around the office, responding to that. And it's just, you got to have a great support system around you. You have to have a great, what they say, behind every great man is a better woman. But, it's just, you got to have that support. And, you need it because it's not a 9 to 5. Incidents are going to happen in the middle of the night. You're going to be on call. Doesn't matter if you work in a SOC or not.
Yeah, just kind of, since you touched on some of those things, you've worked in other areas of security. Could you share with our listeners what areas you've worked in security? Because a lot of people are familiar with the pen testing and the hacking piece, but some people may not be familiar with some of the other roles.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started out on the blue team side. At the time, there were no colors. There was no this blue team, purple team, red team. That's a new sort of thing. 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. You were like an ethical hacker or you were an intrusion analyst or log analyst. So I actually started out in a security operations center so my first job, I was doing, believe it or not, just sort of general security administration, securing the servers, keeping things up and running. Then I moved into more of a security operations center role where I was looking at events, analyzing events, trying to eliminate false positives in the time of snort signatures and snort, and trying to find the real before machine learning. And trying to tune snort signatures. So that was my life for a long time. I got into forensics and did the whole DFIR, did the SANS 503. I think it's called the digital forensic DFIR. And then got into, got my GX certified intrusion analyst certification. So was really big into packet analysis. I always sort of defined myself as a packet monkey. I always loved looking at packets, looking at Wireshark and TCP dump. And I loved it. New exploit would come out and I would run the exploit, record the packets and write a paper on it. Did some great papers on that. And then one day I think I just woke up and said, I want to be a breaker. I want to break things. I want to hack things. I want to blow things up, and started getting into penetration testing and learning how to do that and get better at that. The thing about me at the time was I thought that I couldn't be an elite, quote unquote, elite penetration tester if I didn't know how to code. And I want to tell your audience right now, all of you, and there's a lot of people that will disagree with me, but I want to tell you right now, don't listen to that. It's FUD. It's BS. Don't listen. You can be an amazing hacker. You can be an amazing penetration tester, not know how to code. I don't care what you say. This has been a religious debate for a long time, and it's kept some brilliant people out of becoming pen testers because they thought they weren't going to be good enough because they didn't want to code. Some of the best penetration testers I've ever met, some of the best hackers I've ever met, couldn't write a line of code to save their life. I published the first vulnerability on hacking VPNs on BugTrack and spoke about it at Black Hat briefings in 2000. And I can tell all of you that I couldn't write a line of code to save my life. I've got, not that this even matters, but I've got CVEs to my name. I've got all this. I've published a lot of vulnerabilities in my career, and I'm not a programmer. You do not need to be a programmer to be an effective penetration tester. It's not true. It's just not true.
That's great to hear, especially for someone at your level, because a lot of the people I've seen that have been really good know how to program. So that's good to see examples like that. And that's encouraging to people. But one of the things for our listeners that are new, they're just trying to get in, is pay attention to their background. She worked in a SOC. She knew how to analyze packets.
Yeah.
She knew how things worked. So it's a lot easier to figure out how to break it if you know how it works.
That's a good point. You can't skip over that stuff. I know it feels remedial and I know it feels boring and you don't want to look at packs, but much to Philip's point, I mean, I understood layer 3. I understood all layers of the OSI. I understood the TCP IP internet model. I understood the stimulus and response system, TCP three-way handshakes, the 9th byte offset of the IP header, all this stuff. I understood the plumbing of all of it. And you do have to get deep. You don't necessarily have to be able to write the code. Like if you think about it, when you're, especially today, where everything is a SaaS platform and everything is web-based, and you've got all of these containers out there and workloads out there, a lot of times you don't have access to the source code. You're not going to be able to do static code analysis on some things. And it's still possible to find vulnerabilities. And it's simply, like Philip said, simply by just figuring out how it works. Hacking is nothing more than setting a stimulus to something that the developer didn't expect to receive. And then the developer not being able to accommodate for that and failing to some sort of insecure state or providing access to something that it shouldn't. It's not about the coding. There's plenty of tools out there that can help you that have already been written for you where you don't need to reinvent the wheel and write it. So, and please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the programmers out there who are penetration testers are wrong. God bless you. I don't care to stare at lines of code all day. So I think it's great that you can code if you can. I think it's great if you're a penetration tester and you can write your own exploits. It's just not necessary. For those of you who don't want to code, and those of you who who are afraid of becoming a penetration tester because you don't want to code, don't believe it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I see so many people are wanting to get into it, and the steps they take, they're going to learn Python or whatever before they even start. So they're
scripting
taking
languages,
whatever time to learn to script, or even, those that try to go into learn programming languages take the time to do that. And sometimes they procrastinate and just totally lose track of their goal. So
yeah, it's was it that they say, don't make perfect the enemy of the good. Figure out your GPS and where your goal is. Where do you want to go, and what are the steps that you need to get there? And I promise you, if becoming a penetration tester is what you want to do, but the idea of coding anything just turns you off, that's okay. You can still be a pen tester. It doesn't mean you have to know how to program. Is it cool to be able to write your own tools for something that you need made? Yeah, of course it is. I wish I had the passion to program. I just don't. Sure, it would have been cool to sit down and write my own Python script or write my own C exploit, but I just had no interest in it.
So we're getting close to the end of the show, and I just kind of want anything that you would like to talk about that we hadn't touched on, or any advice you'd like to give.
No, I do want to leave with one particular message. I've been talking about this quite a lot lately. And, one of the things that I want to make sure to emphasize is, especially since it's Pride Month, is to, my message to all of you is let's just take care of each other. This divisiveness that is so systemic in our industry, this more elite than thou attitude in our industry needs to stop. I've seen horrible threads on Twitter where other women wanting to get into cybersecurity are being blasted because they can't list every CVE or they don't have any CVEs to their name. All of this divisiveness and making people feel marginalized, whether they're part of the LGBTQ plus community or not, or anyone. Adversaries want us to be divisive. Adversaries want us to turn against each other. How do you defeat an enemy that's bigger and more powerful than you? How do you defeat an enemy that has more soldiers and more, are better trained and better equipped? And, you turn them against each other. That's how you defeat that kind of enemy. So the enemy wants us to turn on each other and not be inclusive. And so the more defenders that we can rally, the better. We're all on the same side. Happy Pride Month to all of you. And, with everything that's been going on in politics and everything that we've endured, it's created a lot of hatred and indifference. And it just needs to stop. And I want to do everything I can to help us all just take care of ourselves and take care of each other. That's all. And to help each other, guide each other. We've got awesome content like Phillip's station and other content out there who are trying to teach people how to do this and be better at it. And that's what we should be focused on. Not the color of our skin, not who we choose to love, and not who we choose to be.
Awesome. What a great way to end the show. People, if you just be more accepting and be, open up to friends of all walks of life, your life is so much better. So definitely some of the best friends I have are not like me. One of my best friends, I grew up a Christian, and one of my best friends is an atheist, but that guy, what you're taught growing up in that religion, you don't expect those people to have morals, but my gosh, it's just things that you don't understand. And so, I kind of encourage people to get to know other people, and it's not like you. It's fun, and you can make some really great friends.
Yep, definitely. And always self-evaluate. We as humans evolve. And that's the beauty of humankind, is we evolve and we get to a point where eventually we just need to stop and question ourselves. Are our thoughts and what we were raised to believe or what we believe now, are they outdated? Do we need to evolve to a higher level? That's what I would put out there. And with that, I'll say subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And appreciate, that's the best way you can support my content.
Yes, and this will be in the show notes, so you can find Alissa's Medium and YouTube and all that good stuff in her YouTube channel. So it's some really good stuff to do. That'll keep you busy for a while, just trying to get through it all.
Yeah, well, Phillip, you inspire me. Thank you for your format, your microphone, and your stage. Thank you for giving me a platform to tell my story and be introduced to your audience. You put out great content. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you. Like I said, you're one of my favorites, and it's been an honor to speak with you. And I look forward to the day that we can meet in person.
Me too. Yay. Thanks, Paul.
Well, thanks everyone for joining.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.